That's good.
Just don't get.
And then-
The fascia board is starting to.
Notice all this.
sting my lungs.
What's on one? If you're the older one's trying to come in. over
They're
there.
taking 90%, and then the color won't match, so. Yeah,
So we're recording.
was the contractor someone that you
It's
knew?
interesting how quickly they color it, especially if it's in the sun.
Good afternoon.
It's an
I'd like to call the meeting to order.
So the underground.
Roll call, Chris. Kimberly, Tanya, Anna, Michelle, and Mattson, and Hans. Very good. Our old business is consideration of the July 23rd, 22-24 minutes. Paul, you did another fine job with that. Did everybody have a chance to review it? Yeah. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
There are some additions that I've made, and I'll give you the Lenny right,
Okay.
I don't know.
I
Lenny-
think you did that, didn't you already?
I got further corrections.
Oh,
Oh, okay, so then should we
Oh,
hold off on?
no. Grammatical
Don't
corrections.
do it, don't, well, I mean, are we gonna start holding you to grammatical accuracy? I don't know about that,
Now, I'm being held.
is it?
Not a bad thing.
So you
Some
wanna-
of them were in your agenda items, the bullet items, but
Right.
I passed them on saying it wasn't my fault that.
Mine had problems?
We'll talk about it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Are we,
So,
should we
okay.
wait on these or just,
No, go ahead, it's fine.
Approved as,
yeah?
Is-
As amended,
As
all.
amended,
as
yeah.
amended.
Do I have a second on that?
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Oh.
Unanimous? Great. Our first item, we've got two items today. First, Hans is gonna explain what the. Okay, right there, construction of newer and large basement or foundation. Requiring soil excavation within 25 feet of normal high water mark.
Yeah.
This was brought before the planning board. They, had a. I understand was a very thorough review. Some people wanted it, some didn't, so it didn't get passed. But now some residents have weighed into the town and that we brought forward again. I spoke with Sarah Langet yesterday at the PLA meeting. And she said, yes, it's gonna be a time to, bring forward, people can get on it. Not sure where the planning board is on it now, but we'll have our shot. And with that, I'm just gonna explain.
So they're gonna revisit it, they voted to turn it down,
Right,
but they're gonna revisit it and have time for public comments.
public comments, that's what she,
And she'll let us know and
Right.
we'll let her read it.
we may, depending how this goes, some of us may wanna go to it. We may not have the time today to have a motion that we wanna go one way or another, but certainly our members should be there.
The vote was 3-2 on that.
So it's close. Close. So she said. Go for
Right.
it. On,
Sorry. Just to pick up where you dropped off, the discussion, it's on an agenda item. To discuss the email that was circulated about the rejection of this proposal. Unlike the planning board, I get out and I hear a lot of feedback from citizens, a lot of complaints, and have to explain why certain things are permitted and why certain things are not permitted.
What email was that? Is that available? Does it?
I believe it's the one that Jana,
I can,
Oh, that ain't-
I didn't send it everywhere, I guess.
No, I know that email, I just want to know.
That's
what
the
you're
one.
referring to.
that's the one.
okay, that's the one that has the
The
proposed
proposals
language
in it.
and as they saw it.
Uh-huh.
Brian,
Oh, sorry.
no, you're probably, he's gonna go first, but you'll be at 4 o'clock.
So, how you doing?
Hey, Austin.
Good.
Thank you, Brian.
Hey, by all means, thank you.
I think Paul watched the YouTube video of the meeting.
2.5 hour meeting, I watched the whole
It's a
thing.
lovely one, isn't it? Anyhow, it was passionately discussed in the beginning. It wasn't the first discussion we've had. This was about the third time it was discussed at a meeting. And
Oh, this is for properties that are grandfathered, is that why it is possible to do this within such close proximity to the water?
so any structure that is existing, whether conforming or non-conforming, is allowed to put a foundation under it,
Okay.
the way the rules are written right now. And the proposal was that we create a setback of 25 feet to protect the root systems along the shoreline,
Of non-conforming structures as well.
all structures. If it doesn't have a foundation under it, it won't happen. So the proposal was for all new foundations, new front wall, new slabs. So if there's an existing house, it's got a concrete block foundation under it, that would be able to be maintained, maintenance.
So Hans gave us these pictures last Tuesday when we came here by mistake. And I could pass them around and you could see what his concerns are.
So and for example, we paddled by one on our lake that was not 10 feet from the lake. I knew the house, he could have moved the house back easily. He's digging right in the buffer zone, the very area that we're asking people to maintain to save the lake. So what it seemed to us when we sent the letter was that there's one part of our organization that is striving to protect the lake. But then we have the planning committee, allowing what are they? Planning board, we're allowing people to do exactly what we don't want to happen in the area that we're trying to protect.
But in that 25-foot protected zone, anybody operating equipment has to be certified. In terms,
Oh, yeah. I'm sure
Right.
People are certified. The problem is what Hans is proposing is that we don't build, that if the house could be pushed back, it should be. More than 51% of the erosion in Messalonsky is due to erosion coming off the front of people's properties. And this would prevent that from happening. What I'm going around is trying to get everybody to rebuild their the front of their property with trees and bushes and duck and stuff all over again, because if you look at lakes that are not developed, they're as clean as they've ever been.
right,
So this is in fact the goal, and people are just becoming aware of it, and I feel like half of us are aware and are really working towards that, and some of us are not aware. And, and want to let people who own their property do whatever they want, but at some point, we've got to move to a place where we understand that it's not gonna be in anybody's best interest to be doing that, because there won't be a blue lake, it will be a green lake.
So people were saying that they want to be able to economically do whatever they want to their property, but this is not 1980 anymore. And I don't know if somebody's certified to do construction, does that mean that they're not gonna disturb the roots? What does certified mean?
well,
It means they're certified by DEP for environmentally safe practices, putting up the proper erosion control.
Okay,
Right now, by ordinance, people are allowed to dig up their house, put a foundation under it, shut the house back down. They are, as a stipulation, supposed to move it back to the furthest practical extent. However, the house in your neighborhood there, her holding tank is right behind the house.
Oh, really?
So that,
Right,
and then there's the right of way, so
yeah.
yeah.
practically parking on her holding tank as it is, there's no room to move her
Turn
back.
the house this.
I mean, I don't think it's feasible really to ask somebody to move their house. I mean, that's quite a project compared to just
But they're.
jacking it up, but just a good post that would remediate their problems instead of a foundation.
Well, again, the ordinance allows it, so the planning board cannot deny their request.
And that's what happened in Pine, what is the address?
Pine Beach,
Pine Beach,
two houses down there this past year.
and was there a foundation existing there?
At 100, yes, there was, but at 90, there was not.
And they're building a foundation in 90?
It's complete. And what you notice is that if you go down there and visit, the terrain around there is very rocky. You know, it's Belgrade, and it's got trees runoff channels. Well, after you do the foundation, you dig all that dirt and they take the forms out and they move the rocks away. Well, then the dirt gets, the spoils get spread out evenly, and erosion control is grass seed and sand, I mean straw. And now we got a beautiful lawn.
Right. And
how would
they drain the footing of that, of that?
With the standard foundation drains and stone.
would go into the lake,
Yes,
which, yeah, and seems to me pretty obvious that the rain's gonna percolate through around the foundation down to the footing and through the drain and into the lake, which means that phosphorus is gonna go into the lake from the footing.
the foundations where they dig, it's 18 inches around, it's filled with stone. So the drains are in stone, they're not in soils.
Right.
And it has a good silt capturing fabric on, over those, so it doesn't clog those.
When I
systems.
was a younger man, I
Right.
put in footing drain, so I know how it works, and I just think that it seems pretty obvious that. And maybe Charlie, maybe you could weigh in, wouldn't, if you've got a foundation that's backfilled with probably bank run gravel or something like that, wouldn't the rain percolating through that dissolve the phosphorus, and then it would go through the fabric to the piping and out, wouldn't that happen?
I think, without knowing the details,
Yeah,
the phosphorus is gonna move very easily.
yeah,
And unless it's somehow locked into something, whether it, like aluminum or.
right,
So, phosphorus moves pretty easily if if it has a chance to percolate through soils properly, like in a septic system that's been designed and built right, then it stands a good chance of not getting to the lake. But there's 100 variables on most of these things as well. But, to your point, building right next to the lake and, if you can use these, allowed opportunities to upgrade standards at the same time, I think we've talked about that.
right.
This might have been a good opportunity to do that if the rules were already in place.
Right.
Now, my experience is that some of these foundations, that are near the lake and are, almost some of them are just a little bit above the lake, don't they? I had a neighbor who had just water in that foundation, so he obviously was into the water table when they put the foundation in.
Foundation is a broad term, you've got basements,
Right,
which will collect and hold water in the right conditions.
Right.
Then your neighbor is not doing a basement, she's just doing,
Crawl space,
basically poured footings with a frost wall.
yeah,
So
Yeah,
so
I
the
thought
soil's
that.
staying in the middle,
yeah, I
she's doing
thought
the
that,
minimum impact, she's not going deep.
just to stabilize the.
right,
Because the trees on the very front there, I photographed them and
yeah, I didn't,
talked to the contractor. And he knows,
yeah, I didn't think they were putting the basement in, but I do think that this proposal would be a good one. And if, for example, the house could not be moved, then you make arrangements for that, but I just think we should set a precedent for protecting the buffer area.
But I mean, my family's got several cabins that are within, most of them, I mean, there's 3 that are right along the lake in Rome, but they're 8 to 10 feet from the lake, they're built in 1932. They're built on, they were just built on rocks, and you have to jack the thing around because it moves with the frost, and now there's, maybe there's a concrete pad with some stone underneath it, which makes it move a little bit less. But that's what you bought, that's what you get, I mean, that's what we built, my grandfather built, but it's not like you need a foundation, that's.
No, people
So I think you
thinking
can just say no, is what I would say, you just say no, I'm sorry, you can't have a
But
foundation.
the issue is, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that if a buyer comes along and buys your grandfather's
Yeah,
house
Right,
with 8-10 feet away with this kind of structural,
they can put in a foundation,
they can put a foundation
yeah,
and then pay consideration for the fact that they can do that. And people are told that they can do that. So now we're talking about taking away real estate value from a home.
Right.
And I'm not saying, I'm just saying
No,
it's wrong, but I just.
yes.
And so
But on the
in a
other
way, it's a
hand-
retroactive act. Because we're now saying if somebody, neighbors have spent ungodly amounts for a camp. And because they know they can tear it down and much non-conforming and build a new monstrosity as Craig.
But does that make, I mean, yeah,
Maybe it's
I guess that argument is, we're talking about the greater good, which is the.
Well, I'm playing the devil's advocate.
Right, no,
So
I
really,
get it, but-
But the state changes shoreline zoning all the time. You have to comply. We renovated our camp 4 years ago and the rules changed.
Yeah.
And we had to comply even though we owned almost 15 years. And we had planned to do something. But by the time we did it, we had to alter our plans to accommodate the rules that were in place at the time. And
Right.
it's
I mean, you used to be able to build a boathouse. We
exactly.
now all know you can't build a boathouse anymore, but. if
Or
you-
decks on the
if you-
water. I
if
mean,
you if you bought in 1960 and then you couldn't do it in 70, then yeah, you lost some value.
you either carpe diem, do it while you can, or you know,
that's one
you know it can
concern.
change.
The other concern that the planning board, people on the planning board had, who were contractors. Was that it's gonna interfere with the structural integrity of the building.
That is in certain situations, okay, where. You got water that. Your neighbor lives on a hill, water flows freely under the house. Under the house, vegetation will not grow, so when that water comes. Very easy for it to pick up soils, it will continue on right down into the lake. So by putting this frost wall around it, you're creating a barrier now. The water's not gonna run under the house and pick up the soils from under the house, it's gonna have to go around. Hopefully enter the foundation drain system, get filtered, and when it's discharged, it'll be clear.
And you think that the phosphorus will be filtered out of the water?
The phosphorus binds to the particles of soil. Clay,
Does that seem right, Charlie? I mean,
I
I
think
don't,
if it goes through a filter fabric, it's not gonna do much, but if it has a chance to go through clay, it's gonna bind it. So it really depends on the.
But if you can direct it over to vegetation, that will help arrest that.
no, I get, I know the whole vegetation, the buffer thing and all that, which is ideal, but in a situation where you've got a foundation that close to the lake and you're saying that it's gonna be better if you have a frost wall. We should talk to Dave Rope
in
about
certain
that.
situations, but what Alphon did out there, he's 2 feet from the water, he had flat land. Really, the foundation does nothing but stabilize the structure there.
But we're not opposed to foundations, we're opposed to a foundation so close to the lake. So the idea is we wanna have a buffer. That's the point that we're trying to get across to people. If you're building a house so close, you can't have a buffer, you can't, if you've got a foundation there, you're killing the roots of anything that's growing as soon as you dig there. So it's not so much about a foundation, it's more about where is the foundation, and if a house cannot be moved. I mean, when we built our house, they came to see if we could move our house back, and we were willing to do it, but there was no way that we could do it. So they gave us a permit to do what we did. So I think that we need to make a law at least. Times have changed, we have to start standing up for the lake the way we stand up for people's pockets, or nobody's gonna have a lake.
Right,
Can you approach it from the aspect of protecting the buffer? That,
That's what
that's
I,
really what you're after, right?
yes.
What if the ordinance was about, you can't disturb or destroy a buffer? And if putting a foundation would do that, then that's inherently not allowed.
Mhm.
How big a buffer? What's the definition?
Well, we're talking now, we talked about a minimum of 10 feet. We didn't want to make it when we had our conversation, correct me if I'm wrong.
30%.
Was the 30%?
Right, that's what we did
You know,
then.
we talked about feet and decided that wasn't
Right, that's right.
doable, but we could require 30%. of.
Of the property.
The distance, yeah, I'm trying to think what the distance is, where, all properties have a vegetative buffer covering at least 30% of the distance between any structures and the lake, so that's what.
Also, it's a
Kind of.
developed property, 30% of the developed property, which is the property in front of the house to the lake. Is that,
Well, I mean, the current law requires it prohibits you from building within the 100-foot setback. So that's already covered. So we're talking about so we're saying require that all properties have a vegetative buffer covering at least 30% of the distance between any structures in the lake. This requirement will be triggered on existing properties whenever the property owner applies for a permit for any other permission from the town. Also triggered whenever more than 1 cubic yard of soil on the property is disturbed. A yard of soil, parentheses, is my research, a yard of soil contains approximately 12 pounds of phosphorus, and remember, we found that what is a pound equals 500 pounds of
501.
algae, right? Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting, 1 cubic yard of soil, moving 1 cubic yard of soil.
1 cubic yard, and hey, I wrote this, so, this is
Yeah.
where I'm, this is a negotiating position,
Okay,
right?
One cubic yard is a little bit more than a wheelbarrow.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Cubic yard is a lot more, unless you got a pretty.
That's what the construction guys told me to make.
Think about it, it's 36 by 36 by 36, that's a big freaking.
It's a big wheelbarrow.
That's three scoops of my, 6 foot Kubota.
I'll check it out.
Yeah, you can check on that,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty small.
Hard to say, small part, that it's a certain boundage to keep it going.
Looking in the notes, it says the purpose of this new language is to prevent soil erosion extremely close to a water body. In filling of existing trees and other vegetation along the waterfront by disturbance of the root system by excavation activity.
I mean, just looking at these photos, it would seem that in terms of the buffer, it would be the trees that would be most in danger, because these are deep roots that are being disturbed. More than the sorts of plants that we're generally talking about with buffers.
Yeah, and that situation, they went down 4 feet.
Yeah, well, if you're gonna go for a frost wall or for basement.
And there was discussion, if you remove these trees to make the foundation,
Yeah.
how do you restore, how do you compensate for that, how do you revegetate?
right?
Well, we got
Is that possible to do?
Not in less than 50 years, and in some places it's not possible. So where I'm doing, Lake Smart, I'm visiting people that have cut down their trees already, and I'm trying to encourage them to just start to plant trees. In other places, I'm visiting people that have beautiful canopies, but nothing else. That is easy to fix. So it depends on what the circumstance is, but cutting down big trees, that's the thing we really want to stop happening right on the waterfront.
I think was it Dave Rope that said that, big trees, actually bushes and other vegetation is probably more important than big trees?
It's not more in addition to, so the big trees are important because you want to shade the area. One of the other problems is everybody's boiling hot. The reason everybody's boiling hot is they've cut down their trees, and imagine what that does to the earth and the things that grow. So you need all of, if you look at a natural environment, you have 5 layers. You have a tall canopy, you have a mid-story, you have your perennials and your bushes, and then you have the duct that just naturally accumulates from the trees. And it's, that's the environment we want to try and make again. I don't know that we can in these developed areas, but it's certainly the antithesis of what people are doing.
Yeah. Well,
So you certainly don't want to cut down trees, and the roots in those trees are very, very important. And, the more we're finding out about the roots of the trees and how trees are all connected to one another, my neighbor cut down, I don't know, how many trees? 7 trees last year. What happened during 11 trees? What happened this winter was right behind where he cut those trees. We lost 50 trees because they were vulnerable. They were sitting in a wet area.
It was a grove.
But they were protected and they never fell down in all the years that, not me, I've only been there for almost 20. So for a long time, those trees have been there. And then all it took was this elimination of these trees. The whole thing was destroyed.
That tree canopy also breaks up heavy rainfall, when you get
Yes.
the downpours that we've had. It breaks up that heavy rain, if they
Right.
weren't there, then that rain just pounds the ground and creates the, the erosion. But if it hits the tree canopy, it becomes more down as a mist or a finer, waterfall, and it does less damage,
Yeah.
so.
Pete Callen did a nice article on that in summertime, the recent summertime of dog race, kind of diagram how it hits, it slows it down.
Right,
Instead of pounding it down, it trickles down.
right.
And they cut the trees so they can plant grass. And, so it's just.
So may I suggest that we as a board bring this to a question? Because I wonder if it's sort of the process, if we as a board today vote to support this. I like to put that before us, that we have a consensus or a vote on this aspect, and I think it may help the planning board be an influence.
So we would add it to our sheet saying that, foundations.
This is an amendment that we are gonna suggest that goes
Will be
forward.
part of our amendments
Right,
that we're talking about.
Bring
I'd,
before,
suggest that you show up at this next planning board
I
meeting.
will, I
When
just
it's
need to
gonna
know
be
when.
discussed
Yeah,
and vocalize your concerns there, because right now the planning board doesn't have the public ear.
No.
Nobody comes and says, you need to do this, we'd like to see this happen, that. I try to initiate some discussions and they say, well, we take direction from the select board. So you gotta bark up one of those two trees in order to be heard.
right.
There was no one at the meeting, is that?
The next planning board meeting is this Thursday, and then the next select board is the following Tuesday. So that means
And are they gonna bring it up
at 6
again?
o'clock.
Yes.
But Hans, there
They're
was
gonna bring it up
no,
on Thursday to
It will be,
bring it up
the
again?
email that was sent out was gonna be discussed.
but I recall it was nobody from the public at the meeting,
Exactly.
it was empty.
But I think it would be
Because
wonderful
I initiated.
for us to support it and make a statement like that and send it along, because I think it would encourage them, and I'm gonna be there.
We can be there, but I think we should also have
Yes,
a letter or a motion or somehow.
You need to have a
formally
position,
express our
you need a
position to
position.
the planning board.
Yes,
yeah,
I agree.
like we did on
Yes.
solar, like we did on a
Right.
number of other things.
and we should add it to our
Right,
amendment, our, what are we writing, whatever it is we're writing, our, what is it called?
Discussion topics and ideas for changes.
Yeah, add it to that
so
thing.
we haven't really had emotions, but can we, how would you?
How would I do it? If I was Kim,
You are
so I
king.
think, no, that's king. We could, have a motion that to support the prohibition on foundations within 25 feet of the water. That's, I mean, essentially, that's what we're talking, right? Within shoreline.
We
So,
consider-
so
Is there
the
language?
motion that we would support the proposed prohibition by the planning board of stopping foundations within, something like that.
But understand that this is not this is gonna be a recommendation of the planning board to the select board. This is not something that the planning board is adopting.
You should
Well-
make a request that the planning board. Or the select. board
Revisit it.
Put it to public vote, because that's all.
It'll go to a
What
vote.
would
It'll go to
what
a
happened
public
is
vote.
it would have gone to the people,
Right.
and the people haven't been heard.
And typically, when the people get something, we hear what the people in power believe, and we basically go along with what they say unless we know better about it, which I never feel like I do. So I think it's important, and our request was that they revisit it at their meeting and vote on it again. So then if it goes to the select committee, it certainly has a different point of view.
How was 25 feet proposed?
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
You want the verbiage?
Yeah. Should have the exact verbiage. that we-
Why isn't it, I mean,
Why
why,
is it 25?
why is it 25? Why, yeah, why isn't it 50 or
Why
100?
not 100?
Yeah, I would actually say 100.
I was trying to start at a place that was reasonable for saving root systems along the shoreline.
Yeah.
That's a good answer,
Yeah.
as a start. But no, I think anything within 100 feet should be discouraged, because that's what the standard is,
Yeah,
Right.
now. I'm sure there's exceptions that can be thought of, but
Right.
I mean, if every camp that didn't have a foundation and was near the lake, decided they all want to have a foundation.
right, there's a lot of digging,
Digging.
it's a lot of digging.
It sure is.
We'd be in tougher shape, a lot tougher shape than we are.
Like
right now.
North
We
Pond.
might as well just forget the shoreline zoning and just worry about something else.
I don't mean to say, it just was, I don't know that it's quite that dramatic. If you have a contractor who is in fact certified and it's, I grant you 25 feet is close, so, but I mean, I'm very much opposed to doing it within 10 feet or something like that. But if you're back 25 or 30 feet and somebody knows what they're doing, I don't think that it's going to do a whole lot of damage.
You don't
So
think,
you don't think a foundation, digging up a foundation 20 feet, 20 foot within, or are you saying within or?
Yeah, I think, well, I think that it could be done. I'm not saying that it necessarily would be done. There's the possibility of real damage is absolutely there, but I am saying that somebody who's certified and knows what they're doing and does things carefully and does it right could conceivably, I know, put a foundation in within, say, 75 or 50 feet of the lake.
Right, but you're not
Keep
saying.
damage. It's possible.
But
That's
like,
all. I'm just saying.
I'm
Yeah.
asking to clarify, would you support this prohibition within 20?
Oh, absolutely, right, for sure.
That's
Keep
all.
keep in mind, if you're gonna accept the spec at 25 feet, where the wall goes in, or the foundation wall goes in, you gotta dig an extra 6 or 8 feet out from that to get the forms and the work down there, right?
Right.
So you're really talking at 25 feet, you're talking like, what, 17 feet or something like that?
that same neighborhood had one last year that was 8 feet from the lake.
I mean, just,
The
but
permit was
I mean,
8
when you
feet.
dig a hole.
It must have been in the lake.
And you're gonna backfill, you're gonna have the equipment.
And you have a machine that needs at least 10 or
It must have had, tell them about I just told them about the one 8 feet.
Well, there's a couple.
I mean, that's really why that training and certification's there, for anybody who's operating that equipment within 25 feet of water. And really anywhere within shoreland zoning, I think one of the biggest tools that you have. As a municipality is to understand, what the standards are for people who are operating within that area. Because as an arborist, I see a ton, I'm kind of one of the first people in there. And I cut trees, I just did it over in Vassboro. And it breaks my heart because we work so hard to preserve the undergrowth and to selectively cut. And then the contractor came in and just decimated everything that was there. And I mean, I had a silk fence, we had water bars. I mean, we did a really, really nice job. And then they came in and just clear cut the place, threw up a new house. And it's just really sad because unfortunately, that municipality didn't understand really what the rules were. And I see silk fences go up. And the standard is that those are inspected on a daily basis when work is being performed. And I don't see that happening.
No.
And- And so, what I would say is, if this was where I live, I would say, hey, look, if that's a standard that has to be abided by. And how, with you as a contractor, when you're operating within that shoreland zone, what methods are you doing to document that in fact you are inspecting on a daily basis? Because if we have a heavy rain and you lose how many cubic yards of soil on one event from one property, and you do that, like you say, you do that across 10 or 15 projects that are happening per year on each body of water, it's a profound impact. So, you know, I mean, I think that looking at people's individual foundations and things like that, yeah, I think that's a great thing, but I think that the floodgates are open on the other side. And in terms of not following standards and the prescribed framework is available for enforcement and education of the contractors and the homeowners that you currently are working with. And
So Brian, in that situation, are you suggesting that there should be a special permit process where?
I would say that,
Conditions are set forth by a planning board as to how the foundation goes in and how it's.
well, I think it's reasonable that if you're applying to build within the shoreland zone, be it 100 feet or 25 feet, that to at least, as part of the application process, to at least direct the homeowner as well as their contractors, the resource and what the standards are, you know, of existing ordinances and state regulations. And, you know, if I would want to be notified, you know, hey, look, if you are operating within 25 feet, then we need to have certified contractors. You know, if they're operating within shoreland zone, there needs to be daily inspections, and for me, that represents a law. So if I put up the silt fence, you know, every day that I'm operating there, I'm journaling. So
Is that a law right now?
it is, yeah.
So do we need to reiterate it in our ordinance?
I think it'd be helpful, but I think it's just, I don't think a lot of people are trying to circumvent it. I don't think there's any.
So I guess that's a question for Hans, is it, if you have a excavation contractor working within the shoreline zone, are they required to be DEP certified currently?
They are.
Yeah, so I think that's covered. What this group is trying to do is look at changes or improvements to the shoreline zoning ordinance in Belgrade to tighten things up. So the prohibition on foundations, that would be a change in the right direction. So that's great that we already have a requirement for DEP certified excavators, so that's good.
You gotta inspect, you know, you gotta verify.
You have to be held to that standard, just like, you
Well,
know,
yeah,
I mean,
but
it's.
that's
same way with-
not to point fingers, but.
The inspection, I mean, that's a self-inspection. Part of the certification is that they know the standards, they abide by the standards. And like Ryan suggested, they keep a logbook. Well, that's not required. There's other things that are not in the ordinance that should be spelled out, because certain things like when the foundations are dug, the spoils be removed, because otherwise you're just disturbing the soil and redepositing. It's not part of what's permitted. So, you know, that's not spelled out, but it's part of the rule. The DEP wants you to remove the soils, but it's not in the ordinance. So we might put that on.
Does that, you think that needs to be in the ordinance? That,
I think if it's written, it'll get read.
right,
Right.
Because again, if someone's doing this, if we vote now to say you can't build within 25 feet, is there more that we need to put in this? More conditions?
This is about not building within 25 feet, it's not.
Because it means the foundation, you can't build a foundation. within
Foundation.
25. Is there more that you think we should add to this?
Should we add the removal of soil needs to be removed from the property?
I think, yeah, you can ask that to be amended to include. Just, you know, to spell it out.
I mean, or do you suggest that, you know, for a property owner has to go to the planning board, get a special permit, and the planning board can set conditions necessary to preserve.
And they do, and most of the conditions are best practices
Yeah.
that are already defined, but they just want it to be documented on the approval, that best practices.
But that happens already?
Yes.
Okay, so we don't have to add that.
And
We don't.
there's several best practices, you know. They have two that are standard to every approval. And then as the application goes through, they might add another best practice as a condition.
Hans, if we vote on this, could we vote on it as written here? You know, we send back the same document that, the planning board's already seen, and we've reviewed it, we feel it's sufficient or not sufficient, depending on how we vote on it. To,
Yeah.
does it need more teeth, or is this,
I think this is very well written. I
yeah,
mean, it gets to the point without being overly wordy.
And if you change things, it just confuses
that's
people.
what I mean, it seems like this
I
would
would
be
believe it.
as is.
But the question still remains, do we need to add the business of removing the soil? Because it's not practiced.
I think that's definitely something worthy of your list.
So I can put that on the list, but not to muddy the issue
Exactly.
here. We can, so the proposal is that we vote to support the adoption of the prohibition on foundations within 25 feet of water.
Yes.
That's the motion.
Yeah.
And we just,
I move to, so moved.
so moved, I second it, and then,
Any discussion?
any further discussion on that? No, all in favor? Aye.
Unanimous.
Good. So that would be something, I'm not sure I can make it to that meeting, but that would be something you could testify, you know, during the public comments.
Definitely.
We could send a letter
Yeah.
to Sarah.
But
Let's say, we should notify her formally. that we've done this.
I think that would be best, yeah. Okay, perfect.
And it's this Thursday, and what time?
6.
6:30.
6 o'clock. 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock.
But there is a case, an application to be processed, so that'll take at least 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Might help you be alert if you skip the first 30 minutes.
So if the planning board takes a look at this, Hans, what's their ability to act on this at that meeting, or?
They could have a nomination, I guess, to address it again and vote again. I mean, it's the planning board, it's not my committee.
Does it have to go, but does it have to go eventually through the, the voters and the people in
Yeah.
town? So this is just the first step.
It is.
Okay.
From there, planning board would go to the select board approves it, it goes to the public.
Yeah, my understanding, anything we do here,
Mhm.
you know, at the end of all of our deliberations, would go to the planning board. And then we would explain to the planning board, and then that would, whatever they would approve, would go to the select board, and then goes to public vote.
It's gotta go to DEP, it's gotta go. to-
Yeah,
This is a.
How up to date is the planning board on the conversations that have been happening here, if at all?
I don't know.
So this is kind of the start of that, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it goes to the planning board for their comments and
Yeah.
kind of back and forth.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then to the select
You're
board.
thinking of many things, and so this is this is the first salvo, so to speak.
So this is something that has come up.
Right.
And so we're like, okay, whoa, you
We'll
know,
support it.
it's right within our footprint, so it's good.
We're gonna define what a foundation is, like is a helical pier a foundation? Or what?
It's already in the ordinance, I think.
Thing,
I don't know, I just,
What did you call
a helical pier?
And like a technical.
Like a technical.
They strip down instead of a concrete
It kind of-
footing.
Drill them down.
It says right here, does not apply to post foundations, and I think
Oh, gotcha.
that would be a post foundation.
They're not that invasive, they're just going straight down.
Yeah.
And there are more explanatory notes about
Right,
foundations.
so, yeah, there's nothing to stop someone if they want to get away from these concrete pads and the frost heaves, you can go ahead and dig down and put in, you know, a hill post or something else down below the frost wall and just, you know, set it up on that, I gather, because it says that is exempted.
And all these determinations are made by the CEO.
Which determination?
Well, is it a replacement foundation or is it not, for example?
Well, that's, if one exists, then it would be replacement. If nothing there, then it would be new. So,
Like in the situation now, in 90, there wasn't, or you told me it was partial foundation there and they built the whole foundation?
90 was on post.
90's on post, but they're now putting a foundation in.
It's done. They did it with the one-
Because there's no preclusion to that.
No,
Okay, that's what we're trying to address.
no, but he did move his house back a few feet. A few,
So do we need a letter written by our committee to go before, to propose to the select planning board,
Yeah, we'll write something,
write something up?
you, the chairman probably will write something. to the-
I'd like to have,
Chairman.
you know,
Chairman. Yeah.
I think the co-king does.
that we support this.
Yes.
but to clarify, Paul, 100 had a partial foundation, fronts and sides. And it was a monster built over 5 different phases that some pieces are on slabs, some were frost walls, some had mini basements. So it was a real
Yeah.
conglomeration, and again, there was no rule in effect to prevent a foundation from being put in.
Okay,
But obviously, whoever bought that property had a plan in mind that involved the foundation and knew that he could do it.
Mhm.
And that added the value to the property.
this may take a while to go through the system. So,
We've got Brian
yeah,
here.
Brian,
Okay.
We want to get to.
thank you, Ron.
But it's,
Thank you very much.
thank you, absolutely.
You've already been a good help, Brian, so we're anxious to hear from you.
Could you introduce yourself first?
Yeah.
Yeah, certainly. I'm Brian Moore. I own Pro Tree Service. I've been a licensed arborist in the state of Maine for 4.5 years. It's kind of a family business. My dad did this and kind of grew up with it as a young man. And went my own way. When I had my midlife crisis at 50, decided that cutting trees would be a way to tone things down and be easier on myself.
Really, my gosh, what were you doing before?
That's
easier.
I'm just teasing. No, it's a passion of mine and, yeah, so I work pretty much 30 miles radius from Belgrade. I live in Bassboro. And, you know, I work a lot with shoreland zoning, homeowners, contractors. And, if that works for Paul, asked me to kind of stop in, give you a lay of land in terms of kind of what other municipalities are doing. Just what my relationship looks like with shoreland zoning and, you know, just some ideas in terms of ways to manage the harvesting of trees and management of trees and how to work together to make it as easy as possible on homeowners while still being compliant with the shoreland zoning standards that we have. So.
So we've talked a little bit. You spoke, can tell us what research you've done and you've talked to DEP about this?
Yeah, so I mean, like, just to kind of give you an idea in terms of things we talked about, on being an arborist. An arborist in the state of Maine, quite frankly, it's a joke. It's really pathetic. And so, when you look at a standard of somebody saying that they're an arborist and relying on their recommendation, the bar is as low as it gets. It's a beautiful colored manual, about 200 pages, full with great terminology and resources. It's administered by Department of Agriculture and Forestry, and for $75, you send in your application. Really does, if you've had any criminal offense in the last 5 years, you merely need to disclose it, but it doesn't exclude you from obtaining a license. And in order to be an arborist, it takes about 2 or 3 months to get your test date back. You walk into the test with your book and 100 questions, and then really about a 4-hour time frame to complete those. And it's an open book exam. So if there's a term on the question and you can use an index, then you can answer the question and you can walk out with your license. In terms of, how to properly cut a tree, how to safely cut a tree, your relationship with electricity or shoreland zoning, none of that is covered. And if there's two forms of licensing in the state of Maine, there's both a landscape arborist and a utility arborist. I'm both. And from a utility arborist, one might think that that would give you some type of credentials to work near power lines. No. There's no information on that exam that pertains to power line removal whatsoever. And from a landscape perspective, nor does it do that, because there's no difference in terms of ornamental trees or non-ornamental trees, grasses or anything. The only difference between the two tests is the utility arborist is an open book 100-question exam. The landscape is a closed book 200-question exam. That's it, all covering the same material. So I'm not trying to badmouth my own industry or anything, but you know, it's kind of frustrating for somebody who really tries to do the right thing and understand shoreland zoning and work with homeowners and municipalities to come up with sound practices that really the arborist is not a standard of quality or experience. You know, I'm just thinking, that's kind of my rant. There are standards, but that's kind of like having a nationally certified arborist. I mean, that's a completely different game, because it requires tenure, it requires a great deal of knowledge, it's all closed book. And I mean, anybody that passed that exam is the highest standard in terms of understanding everything from soil science to erosion control, safety practices. It's phenomenal. But if you were to implement a standard of having to work with a certified arborist, your pool of certified arborists is so small that I just don't know how you do it. There's probably half a dozen that I can think of within a 50-mile radius of here. And really they're stretched super thin in terms of just their resources. So I think that, you know, the big part of it's just properly educating yourselves and making sure that you're working with a qualified professional that can steer people in the right direction. And all my knowledge really comes from self-study, actually working with DEP on individual projects, becoming certified to work within shoreland zone, and it's, you know, being passionate about what we do. And I think it's just time in the saddle and actually caring about doing a quality job that kind of gets us to where we're at.
Would
Yeah.
you recommend not cutting any trees within the shoreline zone and just trimming them?
I don't think that's a reasonable management strategy.
You don't think it is?
I don't think so, no,
Why?
because it comes down to health and safety. You know, today I was on 3 Mile Pond where I live and had a storm, and 1/3 of a 40-inch diameter white pine fell off. And the other 2 leads that came off from it are hanging over the house. That's life safety. That's like imminent risk. That tree has to go. You can't expect people to live underneath that.
Right, and
Right.
then they'd have to get a permit for that.
No, I didn't get a permit for that because it's immediate. It's like, it's risk to life and property is it's imminent. I mean, there's no question about it. So there's a provision that enables any licensed arborist to take that tree. Now, there's a great deal of responsibility that falls on my shoulders in doing so. I didn't just roll up this morning and cut the tree. I took pictures of the tree, documented the hazard, sent an email to the code enforcement officer notifying them that although I would like to talk to you, I really don't have a choice. I was there at 5 o'clock this morning. And I was on that tree until the minute I left to come here. And so we took pictures when the tree was on the ground. We took pictures of the split in the tree, the rock, and wrote a narrative.
The tree was rotten.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, where the union of the tree came, it did, actually, it had beautiful green foliage. But where that union came together, it was compromised.
That's my problem with keeping every tree.
I mean, it's,
I have the point system, I have more trees that they self-propagate, I have 60 feet of forest.
Yeah.
But you have to start looking at the holes in the trees, we got one coming down. That we don't want to fall on someone, and it's got holes, the squirrels love it, we love to watch the squirrels, but it's a danger, and we got a permit. And I don't think people are being good tree owners if they're not looking at these trees that are diseased and taking care of them, because they're afraid to cut them down. And in the storms, we've had huge trees come down and hit people's homes, and you knew that that tree probably was not good, it was rotten in a part.
yeah,
And that's my concern when you say that, because if a tree falls on your property from your neighbor's house and it is known to be diseased, they pay for it. If it's a healthy tree, you pay for it if it falls on your property, but these unhealthy trees scare me. And we have a lot of ginormous ones that I call an arborist for free to come and say, how healthy are they before we do anything?
yeah. So I mean, I think that, to your question, I think that there's, proper management involves harvest. And from the standpoint of going in and looking at trees that have to be removed, if I rolled up on your property, one of the things that I'm looking for is not only the tree that's the hazard, but I survey everything that's there. And it's looking at, like, a lot of these properties that I show up on, they have one age of all the trees that are on the property. Like, this one's bad, but if you had a crystal ball, you could say, in 20 or 30 years, there's going to be 20 or 30 trees on the waterfront that have to go. They're all the same diameter. And you've built a lawn, and it's having the perspective of understanding diversity. And in terms of age and species, I mean, it's important in terms of the habitat for the wildlife, it's in terms of the strength of the forest around it, and for the longevity of what we have. So it's managing the waterfront property is just like managing a forest. It's about having a diverse forest, it's a healthy forest.
But nobody's been planting, required for every tree they take down, they don't plant 3 or 4 trees.
Well, I submit to you that if they responsibly doing so, and if they're following shoreline zoning, they need to.
Yeah, but I mean, putting blueberries in isn't like taking down a pine and putting more pine.
Well, I appreciate that, but it's trying to replace the canopy that you're removing,
Right.
right? And it has to be meaningful, and you have an expectation that that's going to survive. So the way that it's being installed and maintained is just as important as, plunking a tree in the hole. I mean, we're looking for the long-term well-being of that tree and for the multiple trees that are planted. So for the pine tree that I took today, documented it. Not only did I document the damage, but before I even cut it, I said, my recommendation is that we're gonna plant 3 trees. Native species, at least 1.5 inches in diameter at breast height. Breast height's the standard, 1.5 inch caliper, and at least 4 feet tall. And that would be my recommendation if I was a code enforcement. I think that follows the spirit of what shoreline zoning is trying to accomplish. And that those trees have to be within 100 feet of the waterfront. And, I'm not interested in replanting right where that tree was, because it was right next to a septic tank. And they cut the roots off when they put in the septic tank, and that's part of what compromised that tree.
Right.
So moving it away makes sense, so that's why, I met with the homeowner, and I was like, hey, look, we can do this, but here's some strategies in terms of replanting.
Are they gonna do it?
Yeah, absolutely, they have to do it. I wouldn't cut it unless they embrace the
Who follows up with that?
code enforcement officer will follow up. So that's my recommendation, and then we set silk fence before we cut, because I was within 50 feet of the water. We had massive rain the last few days, it was straight mud, I had to put chains on my bucket truck in order to get it in there this morning, because it was so muddy. And yeah, so I have erosion control, I have replanting, documentation of what the hazard is, and I emailed that to the code enforcement officer with no fear of recourse on their behalf, because I'm following the standard.
Yeah.
And, I think that,
I
yeah,
don't like the sound of the mud that you went through, but that's okay.
if you're in that position in which you had a tree that was broken off and cracked and hanging over your house, I mean, what length would you go to protect the people that are in your
How
home?
did you get that out of there without dropping it on the house?
How did I?
Skill.
No, merely, there's two other pines near it,
Yeah,
so set a rope between the two pines, and it's called mid-span rigging.
yeah.
So I tied this tree to the center of the rope, cut it off, it fell onto the rope, and then I lower the rope down to the ground. So I'm using the tree to either side to support the one in the middle. And, yeah.
Brian, do you have any suggestions how to simplify or change our system we have now?
Well, I mean, we talked about other municipalities have the standard that pretty much, providing you have an arborist sign off on a cutting plan, that they're good with it. Town of Liberty's kind of that way, and there's other I talked to DEP in preparation for this meeting and just making sure, I was sharp. There's other municipalities that have addressed the conflict of interest. And, to be cards on the table, I make my living cutting trees, also preserving trees and replanting, but that's not anywhere near what the chainsaw does for me, right? And that's real dollars and cents. And so, you have to look at people's motivation for what they're doing. And if I'm telling you that this is a hazardous tree and it represents $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 to my family, what's my motivation? So a lot of municipalities are moving towards requiring an independent arborist to write a plan for removal. And another arborist, not from the same company, can do the work. So that there is no conflict of interest. Myself, everybody that works for me is a licensed arborist. So, some people currently play the game, they just have one of their employees who's as licensed arborist make the plan, and then I come behind with the same company and perform the work. Well, that's not the spirit of what they're trying to do.
Is the problem one-off trees, or is it really more of people cutting more than one tree? The one-off tree, it's easy to plant 3 trees, but when someone comes and clears for new development, for a new home, that seems to be more of the issue when they take out multiple trees, not just one.
And it's against the ordinance. That is against the ordinance to do that.
But there are I do a lot of work in which I'm taking many trees at the same property. I'm talking 10, 20, 30. With December storm, I had one property. There were 5 camps in a row, and we took over 400 trees within the shoreline zone with 5 cottages. And they rebuilt one of the cottages. They finished it last Friday. They were done at noon. And at 10 o'clock at night, I got the call because the tree next to the house came down on the house in Friday storm.
Oh,
That's
God.
what I had bad luck.
Well, no,
The roots were unstable?
well, of course, yeah, and so all these trees are codependent,
Right.
and
Yeah, that's. a good one.
pines are fickle in that they'll only put down the root system that they need.
Right.
Right, and if the tree to the right and the one to the left is helping to carry the load, hey, I'm good.
Yeah.
That's the way they operate. But if they had grown independently in the middle of a field, they would have planned. They would have put the roots out that they needed for any,
And how many trees why did you take all those trees down?
because they all blew down. They all,
Oh, they were tipped over.
yeah, they smashed each other.
Yeah. like
And
the gut
then
sticks.
they left 20 trees all 50 feet apart and with no protection, all
Yeah.
wind shear. You know that's gonna happen.
Yeah.
And now there's more and more damage. I went right here on what is it? What's my Christie's store? Foster's Point Road. Foster's Point Road got hammered. Hammered. And properties that have wonderful forests that have never had a problem. You know, and I took 10 monster pines off of one property. And I'm begging the homeowner, let me cut the other 4 around your house. Because if you look at the progression of stumps, 5 years ago, there were 2 that went down. With the next storm, there were 4, then there were 8, and then now there's like 15 that all went down in the last, because, and now it's just creating this wind tunnel that goes right to their house. It's gonna happen,
Does leaving the stumps do anything?
absolutely.
Yeah. you
It's
gotta leave
imperative.
stumps.
Yeah, because those, you know, those roots are gonna hold for a very long time. And they create a highway for new growth to follow those same root lines to establish
Oh,
themselves.
they do?
Absolutely.
So where we live, they're perpendicular to the earth,
Just
nobody
on top.
could,
Yeah, they fall
nobody
over.
could turn them over, they're about, I don't know, half a dozen of
No,
them.
there's still half the roots are in the
Is that
ground.
still okay?
Yeah, I mean, it's,
It's there.
they're still doing their job and you can certainly grind them. You know.
Eventually
get 'em-
we'll take an old
get 'em-
chainsaw,
huh?
eventually we'll take an old chainsaw chain and trim them up a little bit so they don't so bad.
I mean,
They're-
grinding is
Tried
great
to write
because
one for
it
4
tears-
days with winches and it never, I mean,
No,
it would move.
They're as big as a house.
It wouldn't move, no,
Yeah.
it really, it was in rocks, so, you know, but, well, I don't see any roots, but they went straight down.
Yeah.
So Brian, should we deal with? or What seems to be happening is these pine trees are all maturing. And is there a greater loss of these big pine trees? And some of them, I mean, you know, next to me, my neighbor lost their house with a pine tree.
Yeah,
The total.
and I
So
just had
for us
9 more.
As an ordinance, a way to address the mature trees that are dangerous, do you need more latitude? With the CEO, or how does it work?
Do I need more latitude, the CEO, in terms of the
Take
trees
on
we
mature
take?
pine trees,
I mean,
or less.
I think it's, I mean, I think I have a great working relationship with the code enforcement officers that I work with, but a lot of it's the education piece. A lot of times I hear no, we can't take that tree. And it becomes an education issue for me in terms of having to demonstrate why it's a hazard, why it concerns me. I mean, I'm not opposed to being challenged or on my assessment and look at alternatives. You know, one of the things we do to preserve trees is cabling. I don't think there's enough of it done. You know, in
Cable
which,
them.
yeah. Especially deciduous trees, you know, they take it well. But there's a strategy that can be implemented, yeah.
Is there something that we need to do? I mean, you, taking photos, of the tree and the situation, and sending that to the CEO, and you're requiring trees to be planted, and you're, putting in erosion control, measures, are all, do you happen to know whether that's required by the Belgrade, shoreline zoning ordinance currently? Or
Absolutely.
all that's required?
Yeah,
The
I mean,
photos?
that's shoreline zoning, I mean, that pond requires it,
Okay.
yeah, and I would say that. That's his personal standard, I don't know that it's within the,
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I don't know that it's within the ordinance that the pictures accompany the application. I think that one of the strategies that could help. Like everything work well together, I mean, you have a lot of volunteers that do. Lake Smart. It's a function of time for the code enforcement officer, like we come in, well, sometimes they hire us to replant, or there's a plan that requires replanting, like I submitted the plan, here's the pictures, it was justified. But there's rarely any follow-up to make sure that those trees are planted in the manner in which that they're prescribed. And I don't know whether or not that's the case with Belgrade, but kind of like my job's done.
Right.
When the trees are cut, the plans are submitted and the site is stabilized, that fulfills my responsibility. to the state and to the municipality and the homeowner. But there's really no follow-up that I see in terms of ensuring that it actually gets done in the spirit of what's there. And then even if it does get done, the ordinance says really that, or the shoreline zoning says that they have to last 5 years. 3 to 5 years is kind of like the spirit in which they're looking for those trees to to remain. But and there's no follow-up, 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road.
So is this would you call this a tree cutting plan? What does Hans call it? What is when you submit the photos and the plan for the replanting and all that? What do we call this thing?
It's just a tree removal permit.
Permit.
It's a
Yeah.
permit. It's a
Yes,
tree
that's correct.
removal permit, okay.
Yeah.
Good, thank you.
Do people have knowledge or keep the point system? Do they know what the point system is and how many trees they're supposed to have and?
That is the standard.
But do people that you see, like, have any clue of how to do that and make sure that they're maintaining the right number of trees per property?
No, I mean, there's not a prescribed number of trees per property.
But it's the points, the width and the.
It's what you have. So if like, when I bought my property in 2005. I have a responsibility to maintain what was there. I don't have to bring it to a particular standard.
I thought there was a number of points that you had to have and you couldn't go below, so you couldn't cut below 100 points or whatever the number is.
It's managing what you have. Right, so if you bought a house that had a field to the lake, you have no obligation to plant trees or to even have a buffer, which is what's so sad.
That's what we're trying to
Right.
change. See, I understood the other way, that there was a point system that everyone had to have, which could be interesting. To
Yeah.
say that you have to have
No,
60 points.
point system works.
no, the point system is to evaluate.
How much you can take.
Yes, to how to manage what you have.
Right.
That's correct.
That's too bad, because that could probably achieve something to give you a
Yeah,
balance.
that's complicated, because who's gonna go around measuring
Yeah.
the width
So-
of the,
So from a volunteer's perspective, if you know that there's a permit, and you can continue to manage that and advocate for the survival of what's replanted, hey, that would be great. But it becomes a function of time for the CEO to follow up on, on those plans to ensure that things are done in a workmanlike manner. That's the big challenge.
You had an idea, Brian,
Sure.
about getting a group and have an arborist to work with the town.
Yeah, so
Explain your concept.
So, one of the, when I talked to DEP, we talked about having one arborist create a plan that's independent of the arborist that's doing the work, to try to ensure that there's some kind of quality. But, having one arborist sign off for another arborist, that's no standard. Right? Because I could have just taken the test last week. Right? And you could have taken the test this week and we could sign off for each other. I mean, that's no quality standard.
the fox and the chicken den.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things I said to DEP, and we talked about signing off for one another. I said, how do we educate arborists, homeowners, community about what these standards are? Because there's no certification for me as an arborist to work within shoreline zoning. There's no resource there. So what if we said, hey, look, if you want to work within communities can collaborate on this, but if you said you wanted to work with Belgrade, Rome, and Augusta, we'll train you, be happy to come in, put on a 2-hour seminar in terms of what our standards are for shoreline zoning and how to work within our ordinance to meet our standards. And if you attend this and pledge to do this, then you can submit your own photos, your own plan, and conduct your own work. So it's a way of getting people to participate in terms of their own education in order to self-certify to do work within that community. And if you don't, then you go back to the other system that other municipalities have, in which one arborist signs off for another. But if you want to self-certify, you have to at least know what our standards are, so you can be held accountable to those standards. Because if you don't abide by them, then you won't be certified. You won't be a certified vendor for next year, essentially. And it's easy to open it up to everyone, because every arborist in the state of Maine submits their email and contact information to the Department of Agriculture. And you could invite people to attend that training.
What did DEP think of the idea of having certification within the shoreline zone?
I think it's incredible to have education. They'd be happy to support it. And
Is that up for the Department of Agriculture to implement, or can DEP somehow insert themselves in the process? How would DEP do that?
well, I think it'd be the collaboration with Colin Clark or,
Yep.
and somebody else who's people that are experienced arborists that have a proven track record of doing quality work. And a representative from the communities to get together to offer that type of training.
Mhm.
And, I mean,
Sounds like a really good idea.
Yeah.
To me, to require that, at least at the local level, if you can't do it statewide. So
yeah, you're not excluding anybody, you're opening it up to everybody. I mean, it's in our best
free
interest.
education.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're saying that self-certification program, you've got to sort of get educated. Attend a few seminars in Belgrade, for example, get familiar with the practices and procedures and best practices here.
Yeah, absolutely. And, what that would look like in my mind's eye would be to say, look, if you want to cut trees in the town of Belgrade, we welcome you to do that. We welcome you to self-certify your own work. But here's our requirements. You need to photograph the trees you're going to remove before they're taken. Come and learn how to do the point system. We'll walk you through it. It's really not that complicated. And if we can't be responsible for your total education, but we can at least direct you to the resources from the people from DEP who will take the extra time to handhold to get you through an initial submission if you need to, because they have the resources to support professionals to do that.
Would we be writing that requirement into our shoreline zoning ordinance?
The permit.
But I'm just saying is, so how I see it working is that I want to cut trees on Paul's land tomorrow. And I would contact Hans.
So we could write that into the ordinance that, that for any tree removal permit, it would be the owner or the arborist would have to contact the code enforcement officer and give photos of the trees to be cut, describe or enumerate the trees to be replanted.
They need a permit to,
Erosion
tree?
control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we had that if we maybe spelled that out a little bit more
Yeah,
in the ordinance, we could do that. The education part, I'm not sure how we, as the ordinance review committee, how we would implement education.
We were educating the arborists, if we don't standard,
Yeah, but
They're talking about-
who is we though?
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and
There's
is
no
it,
test to take.
is it,
Yeah.
no, it's,
is it in the ordinances that on page 47 that, you're gonna be educated by the town clerk or, I mean, yeah, I don't see.
Yeah, it's hard to.
But you could have I'm just thinking out loud, you could have them submit a plan, this is what I'm gonna do, here are the pictures. And it either complies with the ordinance or it doesn't, and if it doesn't, obviously the person hasn't read it. Or,
Well, then the code enforcement officer says,
say no.
okay, this doesn't
Right.
meet our standards.
Right.
And this is what you have to do to meet our standards.
Yes.
So that, yeah, I could see that all happening if we, the other thought I have is that, volunteers, I've seen over the years a lot of nosy neighbors, being helpful for protecting the, the water body, the lake. So, turning in your neighbors is, kind of, I can think of several instances where that provoke, and basically it's just calling the attention to the code enforcement officer. So one of the things that I have on our most favorite things to do is that, under permitting, all permits issued within the shoreline zone require town notification of a butter. So if we know that our neighbor has got a permit for something, a new shed, a septic system, a tree cutting, then we can, if we're engaged, we can help watch that. I mean, does that resonate with?
Well, a lot of permits in different municipalities, before you get a permit, part of the application process is you have to notify butters.
But I don't see that happening in Belgrade. I mean,
It happened here.
that happened in Sanibel when somebody down the street wanted to do something and they notified everybody. I mean, it was, it was,
So I don't know, that's an advancement on your idea, but
yeah.
that's what happens in the city.
I'm just saying, from the field, and I may not be right, but what I see, when I return to a lot of job sites, and I see a lot of other trees cut, things like that, is that, send in all the pictures in the world, send in all the plans in the world. You're right, neighbors call all the time when I'm cutting a tree, right? And code enforcement comes out hot because they don't even realize, where I am.
Right.
All the other stuff they have going on, they're like, crap, it's you, Brian, oh yeah, I remember that.
All right, yeah, I did that, right.
Right, but the removal of the tree is just, it's not even, it doesn't even represent 50% of the overall opportunity to preserve the resource that you have. It's ensuring that what happens after the tree is cut, in terms of that erosion control, in terms of the replanting and the longevity of those trees is as important or more important than the act of cutting the tree. And ensuring that the people conducting the work are educated and that the people they're doing it for, understand the standard. I think it's imperative that, if you're gonna have a quality outcome. And unfortunately, there's not a resource to educate the people that are performing the work, to do it in a quality manner.
That's the problem with Lake Martin, so that's the approach now. The approach is, we go house by house and I do the evaluation in front of everybody so they understand exactly what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And that seems to be doing the job. So, but for me, I wouldn't know what new trees were recent. I wouldn't be able to be that volunteer unless I was.
Unless the permit was in your hands and you knew what permits were issued. And if there was a system to follow up on the permits, that would be important.
I see that certification list as a benefit to the homeowners who often don't know who to call. And they don't want a non-qualified person taking down a 50-foot tree next to their house. They want someone who knows what they're doing. So if you had someone on that list that they could come to the town and say, who are the 15, whatever people I can call that are good, it would be a benefit.
But you're talking about the national certification though.
No, I'm talking about locally certifying people to conduct work that if just went to a workshop. I'm talking to DEP about offering a workshop for arborists.
So
I'm
back to our committee, that
Might as well
we
include
would need,
contractors in this too.
we would need an existing certification process,
Right.
perhaps run by DEP, that we could then reference in the ordinance to say, you have to have, the arborist, that would be part of the, tree, cutting plan, tree removal plan, permit, would be that the arborist has been certified by DEP basically, which doesn't exist right now. There is no DEP certification.
Or even a training, you know what I mean? It doesn't even have to, walk away with a certificate, but if you
Well,
have
but,
some
but
level
from an ordinance standpoint, we need something,
yeah,
that we could,
tangible.
yeah, tangible, that, and so, I'm still coming back to.
Whatever that ordinance is, in a perfect world, we should have that happen in all properties. And I'm thinking that, the egregious activity is when properties get cleared, people buy a house and they say, well, I want it,
I want a lawn,
it all cleared, I want a lawn, and
just
that's,
like I had in New Jersey.
and that's what, to me, is happening. So I'm wondering whether you could have a transfer of property as a triggering event requiring a forestry review of the standing trees or something. If the sale happens,
Okay, so that's something else.
No law, we can pass a law that says no lawns.
Yeah.
but if, people want to clear, and that's when most of the clearing happens on change of ownership, is that correct?
So I'm not gonna disclose my marketing practices. But some arborists might do direct mails to recent sales of properties, because that might be a heck of a good way to. Because that's the first thing people that are doing are looking at, absolutely,
Really?
100%.
So I think with that, the
Yeah.
sale of property should be a triggering event to some town involvement, looking at the trees that are there, but they can't do anything.
Interesting.
Everybody that's buying a new property is looking at, how can I improve my view?
Yeah.
How can I make my property safe? They're looking at all the central services, whether it's roofs, foundations, whatever it is, that they're in the market, they improve that property.
I would think in the perfect world, I just dreaming here, that, there'd be some municipal certification that requires you every 5 or 10 years to have a forester come in and do a review of the trees to make sure they're all safe, and they're managing the forest, managing.
Safe from your neighbors cutting down.
Yep, we gotta wrap up, you guys.
Yeah,
Do you guys have anybody belong, the ones at the alarm?
No,
No, we're gonna head out.
Close it
No,
up.
I need a certification for
We're
that.
just gonna.
Yeah,
so is that an impossible idea, or is that something that we can add to this? I mean, not the idea that we tell people they can't do anything, but that they have to go before an arborist and get an assessment before they do anything to their property. Can we leave on that note and think about it?
Well, I think,
Well, no,
When it changes.
you said arborist,
When it changes.
Chris said, or Chris or Paul, someone said forester.
Forest.
maybe that's,
Well, it's gonna be
It looked like a septic certification, I mean, there's a big difference, I think, between an arborist and a forester.
Yeah,
in this sense.
I've had a forester come in and look at our property.